Before I start the video, as a quick reminder, check out my links down below to help support the channel. I am now in partnership with Baron of Dice. They have some awesome TCG accessories like playmats, deck boxes, and dice. And if you want to level up your setup, it is the perfect way to do so. And if you want to support the channel directly and get some sweet perks, consider joining the Patreon. If you want to get early access to videos or even some deck help, Patreon is where it's at. And so without further ado, let's get back into the video. Hey everybody, welcome back to Jurassic Magic. I am your host Devin, and on this video and in this topic, I want to talk about something that is pretty common and honestly isn't talked about enough. And to first start off, I have some questions. Why does your deck sometimes just not win? Why does it feel like you're doing all the right things, but the game just slips away anyways? And to answer that question, I will be breaking down 6 reasons why your deck might not be winning the game. And honestly, none of that really means you're a bad player, or really your deck is bad, because if we were judged by that standard, I would be one of the worst players you would ever meet and you'd never want advice from me. So honestly, these are just things we all run into as commanders. So let's get right into example 1, and that's your game plan is probably not clear enough.
What the? See, that's the type of... I'm gonna kick your ass. Ow!
And I run into this problem many times myself. I want to make a great thematic deck, but it doesn't win a lot of games and I decide to scrap it. I like to characterize this section as a question you probably all got when you were kids. What do you want to be when you grow up? And I feel like that's sometimes what your deck is feeling too, because it's not sure what it's really doing in a general sense. An example I could think of, because it is pretty recent, is the new Kratos Stoic Father and Atreus Impulsive Son. There's a bunch of different avenues that can come across with making these commanders. You could go with gods, you could go with proliferate, and you could go with experience counters. And a lot of people could think, okay, what direction do I want to go with? I want to make a thematic god deck, that sounds fun, but really the commanders aren't really focusing on gods too much. Kratos does have that ability. Whenever you attack with one or more gods, and whenever a god dies, you get an experience counter. That in itself is pretty useful, but again, Kratos himself and Atreus are gods. Most likely you're going to have those on the battlefield attacking, and one of them may die. So of course a lot of people may think, oh, I want to add a lot of gods into this list and it'll do fine. But the problem is you're only getting one experience counter per god, unless of course if some of them die then you get more. But then you could go down in that rabbit hole of putting more gods on this list, adding some sacrifice outlets to sacrifice those gods to get more experience counters, but obviously that is not what the strategy is for. And suddenly your deck is doing 5 different things at 40% efficiency instead of doing one thing at 100%. This isn't really a mistake. I know sometimes it's fun to go thematic, but you also want to do what the deck is doing well. It is pretty natural. Commander has a million cool cards, and honestly, even though it's a 100 card singleton, it's so hard to narrow it down just to that 100. But essentially tightening up your game plan doesn't mean making your deck competitive. It just means you're helping your deck do the cool thing you built it to do. But now I wanted to move on to my second topic as far as this discussion goes, and that's the fact your deck might not match the meta you're playing in either direction. And honestly, this one is fascinating and a lot of people don't realize it. Everyone says casual decks can't keep up with high power decks, but sometimes the opposite may happen too. For example, a CDH leaning deck sits down in a casual pod. It's built to punish fast mana, cheap spells, tutors, and stacks heavy interaction. So when they cast a Mystic Remora, usually in their meta it draws like 12 cards off a turn 1 or even turn 2. But in a casual pod, no one's really jamming a Chrome Mox or a Mox Opal. Not many people, unless you're a Storm deck, is playing 3 spells a turn. A lot of people are casting maybe 1 or 2 spells a turn that are probably not even non-creatures. And suddenly that Mystic Remora will draw like no cards and it will die the next turn. Their whole game plan will essentially slow to a crawl. Also, high power decks assume a predictable rhythm, lots of spells, fast pace, quick engines. Casual pod sometimes doesn't follow that rhythm, and there's a couple of times I have experienced that myself. I decided to play a casual deck while some of my friends decided to play a high power CDH deck. I don't know why. That was like more at the early stages of Commander, and sometimes I would win, sometimes they would win. It just kind of happens that way. CDH is definitely more meta independent, where they have a smaller card pool that focus on cards that will go against the other cards in CDH, while casual just has any card possible you want. So if your deck isn't really winning, it may just be the table you're sitting at that it wasn't built for, and that's honestly okay. There's a reason why we have the brackets that I feel like can be a little better. I mean, they've gotten better over time because it's still in the beta system, so this one might not happen as much as far as conversation goes, but from time to time you may face this eventually. But let's move on to reason number 3, and this is all about interaction, but not at the right times. A lot of people say run more removal to win games, but I feel like it's more important to ask the question, when are you using these removal pieces instead of just removing things? This is seriously one of the biggest silent killers of games. A lot of people are playing removal. They could just be firing it off too soon or too late, or on something that might not actually be the threat after all. You may have blown up a value engine instead of a win con. You counter that ramp spell in the early game instead of that combo piece in the late game. You remove that creature that was annoying you instead of that creature that is going to kill the table. And again, this doesn't make anyone a bad player. This is a 4-person game after all. There is so much threat assessment going on left and right, and with chaos ensuing on the table with everyone removing threats or not removing threats, it definitely takes some time learning when to use the counter spell or using the removal spell at the right time, because sometimes your opponent may actually have a removal spell that you could just hold up, wait for them to use it, and then just use it later on when it really matters. And this subject kind of goes hand in hand with my next reason, and that's the fact that you may have the answers but just not the right mix. This is a little bit different than interacting but not at the right times. It's having the right type of removal or interaction. Everyone just says play more removal. It's like a cure for all commander problems, but the real issue is not how much removal you run, it's in which types you run, because a deck might have 10 removal spells, but if they all destroy creatures, you're never really dealing with a smothering tithe or even the One Ring, or maybe all your removal is packed into single target removal, but you actually need a board wipe, or maybe honestly it could be all sorcery speed removal. I don't know why you would, but sometimes it happens. But sometimes you may need to interact with your opponents on their turn instead of it passing to you because you may be just dead on the board. In a way, just balancing them out. That's why I love modal spells. I do like the charms, maybe not the blue one, but I like the black one and the green one for their versatility, because in a way they act as removal exiling cards on the battlefield, along with additional benefits too. So maybe some more modal cards will be useful because you could answer a lot more stuff than just an Infernal Grasp, but obviously run those cards too because creatures are getting more and more powerful these days. And honestly, this is why I just hate the argument of just play more removal. I think the better way to approach that, in my opinion, is by balancing out your answers, because it is way more important than just increasing the number. So now that I've talked about reason 4, let's move on to reason number 5, and it is essentially sequencing. This is one of the least talked about skills in Commander. You may draw the right cards and you may make the right plays, but maybe the order was off by one turn. Sometimes you may have ramped when you should have played a threat, or even sometimes you play that threat when you really should have held up mana. There are numerous examples of this. One I like to share with you that I learned a long time ago that actually is very useful is ETB effects. If you have a lot of creatures just enter the battlefield right away, and some of them have ETBs, you could sequence them in a way that will advance your board state. One example I would like to highlight is when I was playing a game with my Gishath Sun's Avatar deck. I swung in with him, and about 5 dinosaurs entered the battlefield at the same time. One of them was a Galta Stampede Tyrant, another one was a Vault-Born Tyrant, another one was a Earthshaker Dreadmaw, and 2 other dinosaurs that are not really useful in this example, but for the fact that they were dinosaurs. So all of them do have ETB triggers. Galta will put all creature cards from your hand onto the battlefield. Earthshaker Dreadmaw will draw you cards equal to the amount of dinosaurs you do have when it enters. And Vault-Born Tyrant, whenever a huge creature enters the battlefield, you gain a life and draw a card. So because they all have ETB triggers that happened all at the same time, there's a way to sequence it the most optimal way, and that's by drawing the cards off first with the Dreadmaw and Vault-Born Tyrant, and have Galta Stampede Tyrant's ETB trigger resolve last, so that whatever cards you drew with the other dinosaurs, you could just put them directly onto the battlefield and get more value out of them. Or you could sequence it the other way, where you put Galta Stampede Tyrant's triggered ability first, then draw the cards, but then you won't be able to cheat in any more creatures that you drew. So again, sequencing is huge as far as timing goes when using activated abilities, triggered abilities, or even casting spells. Of course, that's just one personal example I have because it is one of my own decks. And now we are down to the last reason, and that's just the fact that you may not have enough ways to actually win the game. You might include 1 or 2 win cons, but honestly that might not even be enough. A lot of people recommend card draw, ramp, or even interaction, but sometimes you might just forget to put an actual win condition in the deck. I've honestly done it many times before, and sometimes I just feel silly, because if your plan A or even plan B gets countered, you might not actually have a way to win the game unless it's the old-fashioned just beatdown plan, or hope somebody takes out a threat and then you take them out. And I'm kind of going back into full circle with my first point, and that's the fact your game plan isn't clear enough, because maybe your win condition is actually there, but you may have actually just removed it for a thematic or even just a fun piece, which don't get me wrong, I like to play my own pet cards too, but if you're playing a token deck, there are a lot of ways that you could win the game with them, or even aristocrats, or even all the ways of winning. Just adding a couple more win conditions instead of just one or two that might get removed or get countered may just cost you the game entirely. But at the end of the day, Commander is big, wild, and honestly super unpredictable.
I have absolutely no idea what's going on.
Your deck won't always win, and that's fine. A lot of people play Commander for a bunch of different reasons. They want to play cards that they can't play in other formats. They want to play more casually instead of the super hyper competitive modern tournaments. They may want to play their janky cards. Whatever it may be, you play Commander the way you want it. But having a clear game plan, the right table, better timing on interaction, and enough win cons can go a long way in helping upgrade your deck. And if you found this helpful, let me know down below in the comments what other strategies have you found to help win you games. I would love to hear your stories. And on the way out, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And with that out of the way, thank you for stomping by.